My name is Rachel, and I am 30 years old. This is the story of how my mentor, someone I trusted more than family, stole my life's work, a pitch worth $900 million, and how I was forced to expose her darkest secret to get my life back. What happened next was even worse than the betrayal itself, but it led me down a path I never expected. Before I get into the details, I want to ask you, if you're watching this, where are you in the world right now? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever felt utterly betrayed by someone you loved and trusted, someone who was supposed to guide you, please hit that like button. It helps me know I'm not alone in this, and it helps others find stories like mine. And please, consider subscribing if you want to hear more stories about navigating difficult relationships and finding your voice. My journey with Evelyn began about 8 years ago. I was fresh out of college, brimming with ambition but completely lost on how to navigate the cutthroat world of tech startups. I met Evelyn through a mutual connection at a networking event. She was a formidable figure in the industry, known for her sharp intellect, strategic vision, and seemingly effortless ability to build empires from scratch. She had a reputation for being tough but fair, a true mentor who lifted others up. Or so the legend went. From our first conversation, Evelyn seemed to see something in me. She told me I had raw potential, a unique perspective, and the drive needed to succeed. She offered to take me under her wing, to guide me, to introduce me to the right people. For a young woman idolizing the titans of the industry, this was a dream come true. Evelyn wasn't just a mentor. She became a surrogate mother figure to me. My own family was supportive, but didn't understand the tech world, the relentless pace, the jargon, the sheer ambition required. Evelyn did. She listened, she advised, she pushed me. She invited me to industry dinners, introduced me as her protege, praised my ideas publicly. I felt seen, valued, and incredibly lucky. Over the years, our relationship deepened. I confided in her about my struggles, my fears, my dating life, everything. She became my go-to person for advice, both professional and personal. She knew about my childhood dreams, my financial anxieties, my hopes for the future. She had access to the deepest parts of me, the parts one rarely showed anyone else. I saw her as family, the family I chose, the one who truly understood my professional aspirations. I worked tirelessly during those years, learning everything I could, taking on challenging projects, always striving to impress Evelyn and live up to the potential she said she saw in me. I started developing my own ideas, sketching out business plans, identifying unmet needs in the market. One idea in particular began to consume me. It was a concept for a revolutionary platform, something that would disrupt an entire industry and create a new market space. I poured my heart and soul into it, researching, analyzing, refining. I remember the day I first pitched the nascent idea to Evelyn. We were having coffee in her impeccably minimalist office, sunlight streaming through the panoramic window overlooking the city. I was nervous, my hands shaking slightly as I laid out the core concept, the target market, the potential impact. Evelyn listened intently, her sharp eyes fixed on me. When I finished, there was a long pause. My heart pounded in my chest. Then she smiled. It wasn't her usual polite or business smile. It was a genuine, excited grin. "Rachel," she said, her voice low and full of energy, "this is brilliant. Truly brilliant. This has the potential to be huge. 9 figures huge, maybe even 10. You need to develop this. I'll help you. We'll make this happen." Her validation felt like pure gold. With her encouragement, I dedicated every spare moment to building out the pitch. I worked evenings, weekends, holidays. I meticulously crafted the business model, projected financials, detailed the technology stack, outlined the go-to-market strategy. I created a comprehensive pitch deck, a detailed financial model, and a concise executive summary. I shared every iteration with Evelyn. She provided feedback, made suggestions, introduced me to a few of her contacts in venture capital for informal chats where I could practice pitching and get preliminary reactions. These contacts, of course, were chosen by her, and in hindsight, I realize now they were likely being used by her to gauge the idea's viability and market interest, all under the guise of helping me. I trusted her implicitly. I sent her the full pitch deck, the detailed financial projections, the executive summary, every piece of intellectual property I had developed. She had it all. She told me she needed it to properly understand the scope and potential, to introduce me to the right tier of investors when it was ready. I had signed non-disclosure agreements with the few people I pitched to, but I had no formal agreement with Evelyn. She was my mentor, my family. An agreement felt insulting to the bond we shared. It took me nearly 2 years to get the pitch to a state I felt was truly ready. It wasn't just a good idea, it was a fully baked business plan, defensible and groundbreaking. The valuation I arrived at, based on market analysis and projected growth, was substantial. $900 million seemed audacious, almost unreal, but the data supported it. Evelyn agreed. She said it was aggressive but achievable, a testament to the strength of the concept. Then came the waiting. Evelyn said she was networking behind the scenes, finding the perfect opportunity, the perfect investor group. I was buzzing with anticipation, ready to launch, ready to finally see my vision come to life. The betrayal wasn't a sudden, dramatic reveal. It was insidious, a slow creep of dread that started with small things. Evelyn became harder to reach. Her responses to my excited questions about timelines became vague. She seemed distracted. When I finally pinned her down for meeting, she was different. Cooler. She downplayed the pitch, saying the market had shifted, that the valuation was probably too high, that maybe I should reconsider the entire concept. I was blindsided. This was the same idea she had called brilliant, potentially 10 figures huge. I questioned her, asked what had changed. She became defensive, then dismissive. She told me I was too emotionally invested, that I needed to be more realistic, that perhaps this idea wasn't the one after all. She even suggested I take a break, clear my head, maybe work on something else. I left that meeting confused and heartbroken. Was I crazy? Had I misread everything? Had I overestimated the pitch's potential? Self-doubt gnawed at me. But deep down, a stubborn voice refused to be silenced. I knew the pitch was good. I knew the market needed it. And I knew Evelyn had been incredibly enthusiastic about it until very recently. Then, a few weeks later, I saw it. A press release. Evelyn's company was launching a new initiative, a revolutionary platform that sounded uncannily like my pitch. The name was different, the branding was hers, but the core concept, the mechanism, the target market, it was all there. The article quoted Evelyn, describing it as a vision I've been developing for some time. My blood ran cold. Development for some time? She had been developing it for the 2 years I had been pouring my life into it, sharing every detail with her. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't just dismissed my pitch. She had stolen it. Every late night, every sacrifice, every ounce of my trust, she had taken it all and claimed it as her own. I felt nauseous. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it was hard to comprehend. This wasn't just a professional setback, it was a personal violation. The woman I saw as family, the one who had promised to help me soar, had clipped my wings and stolen the very thing I was meant to fly with. I called her immediately, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. Evelyn, I choked out. I saw the press release. That's my pitch. You stole my pitch. Her voice on the other end was calm, measured, almost condescending. Rachel, what on earth are you talking about? Are you feeling all right? Don't you dare. I spat. Don't you dare act like you don't know. The platform, the concept, the market, it's identical to what I shared with you. What you praised. What you said was brilliant. Rachel, you shared some ideas with me, she said, her tone softening, becoming almost patronizing. You have lots of ideas, dear. Many of them are good starting points. My team and I have been working on Project Phoenix for over a year. While perhaps some elements of your various brainstorming sessions might have aligned conceptually in a general sense, the core strategy, the technology, the execution plan, that is entirely the work of my company. It's far more complex and robust than anything you presented. That's a lie. I yelled, my voice breaking. You have my pitch deck. You have the financials. The executive summary. You told me it was brilliant. You said you'd introduce me to investors. Rachel, you sent me some documents for feedback, she said, her voice hardening slightly. As a mentor, I reviewed them. I offered constructive criticism, as I always do. The ideas were raw. Promising, yes, but not fully formed. My team took a concept, a general market need that many people have identified, and developed a sophisticated solution. There's a vast difference between a student's promising outline and a multi-million-dollar corporate initiative. Perhaps you're misunderstanding the relationship between ideation and execution. It's a common mistake for young entrepreneurs. A student's promising outline? I repeated, the word stinging. 2 years of my life, thousands of hours of work, a detailed $900 million valuation model, and you call it a student's outline? Rachel, your valuation was aspirational, to say the least, she scoffed. Frankly, it was wildly optimistic and based on flawed assumptions. We've refined the model significantly. Look, I understand you're disappointed your ideas haven't materialized the way you hoped, but to accuse me of theft? That's a serious and unfounded accusation. I suggest you calm down and reconsider your words. You're jeopardizing your reputation in this industry with such baseless claims. She was turning it on me, gaslighting me, making me sound like a deluded, inexperienced child throwing a tantrum. The woman who had built me up was now tearing me down, using my own trust against me. She painted me as naive, emotional, and fundamentally mistaken about the value of my own work. I hung up the phone, trembling. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a burning anger that was quickly overshadowed by despair. Who would believe me? Evelyn was a giant in the industry, respected and powerful. I was still building my name, largely known as her protégé. Her word carried immense weight, mine barely registered. I tried to reach out to some of the contacts she had introduced me to. When I cautiously mentioned my pitch and Evelyn's new initiative, their reactions ranged from polite confusion to outright skepticism. Evelyn mentioned she was working on something in that space. One venture capitalist told me dismissively. She's been developing strategic initiatives like this for years. Are you sure you weren't just riffing on something she had already shared with you? Another contact, someone who had initially seemed impressed by my preliminary pitch, became cagey. Look, Rachel, Evelyn's reputation is impeccable. She wouldn't do something like this. Maybe it's just a similar idea? That happens a lot in this industry. The isolation was crushing. Everyone believed her. My own parents, bless their hearts, tried to be supportive, but they didn't understand the corporate world or the specifics of my pitch. They urged caution, worried about me making powerful enemies. They couldn't offer practical advice on how to fight this. I sank into a deep depression. The energy and passion that had fueled my work evaporated, replaced by a crippling sense of injustice and hopelessness. I felt like a fool for trusting her so completely, for giving her everything without a second thought. Evelyn had used our personal connection, our quasi-familial bond, as a weapon against me. She had cultivated my trust specifically, so she could exploit it. But beneath the despair, a hard kernel of resolve began to form. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not only had she stolen my work, but she was actively destroying my credibility to cover her tracks. If I didn't fight back, I would forever be the young woman with raw ideas who maybe, just maybe, misunderstood the genesis of Evelyn's brilliant project. My reputation would be tainted, my future prospects diminished. I needed proof. Not just the emails and documents I had sent her. She could dismiss those as feedback sessions, but something undeniable, something that would expose her pattern of behavior or reveal her true character. I started digging. I went through every interaction I'd ever had with her, looking for inconsistencies, red flags I had ignored. I scoured the internet for information about her past, her previous ventures, her early career. This was difficult because her public profile was carefully curated, a narrative of success built on hard work, vision, and integrity. I spent weeks going down rabbit holes, reading old articles, scanning digitized business records, looking for anyone who might have worked with her in the early days and perhaps fallen out with her. It was tedious, demoralizing work. I found plenty of articles praising her, profiles highlighting her achievements, but nothing that hinted at unethical behavior. Then I stumbled upon an archived article from a small, regional business journal dating back almost 20 years. It was about a failed startup in a completely different industry than the one Evelyn was known for now. The company had folded amidst accusations of financial irregularities and intellectual property disputes. Evelyn was listed as a founding partner, though her name wasn't prominent in the article. It focused more on the male chief executive officer. The article was short, dense with legal jargon, and quickly forgotten by the mainstream press when the company dissolved. This piqued my interest. Evelyn rarely talked about her early career, preferring to focus on her more recent, highly successful ventures. It felt like a deliberate omission. I dug deeper into this failed startup, searching for legal filings, news coverage from that time, anything I could find. It was like putting together a puzzle with missing pieces, relying on fragmented public records and scanned newspaper clippings. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. The startup's core technology was allegedly developed by a brilliant but naive lead engineer who was a minority shareholder. When the company ran into financial trouble, the lead engineer was pushed out just before a potential acquisition fell through. The subsequent investigation hinted at deliberate mismanagement to depress the company's value, allowing certain partners to buy out others cheaply, followed by attempts to sell the core technology separately, potentially violating agreements with the original investors and the lead engineer. Evelyn's name appeared in some of the legal documents, always represented by formidable lawyers, always seemingly one step removed from the most egregious actions. She was listed as having exited the company just before the mess fully exploded into public view, selling her shares at a profit despite the company's overall failure. The articles hinted at questions being raised about the timing of her exit and her knowledge of the financial irregularities and the plans for the technology, but nothing was ever definitively proven against her in court, at least not publicly. The case seemed to have been settled out of court, sealed away. This wasn't concrete proof of the pitch theft, but it revealed a pattern. A willingness to exploit others' work, to maneuver for personal gain, to exit a situation before the full fallout hit, leaving others to deal with the consequences. It showed Evelyn was capable of exactly the kind of calculated betrayal she had inflicted on me. But how could I use this? It was old history, not directly related to my $900 million pitch. I kept digging, focusing on the lead engineer from that failed startup. His name was David Chun. I searched for him online. It took some effort, as he didn't have a prominent public profile after that incident. I eventually found a LinkedIn profile showing he had moved into a different field, seemingly leaving the tech world behind. I debated reaching out to him. It felt risky, dredging up painful history for a stranger. But I was desperate. I sent him a carefully worded message on LinkedIn, introducing myself, explaining briefly that I was looking into the history of the failed startup he was involved with, and asking if he would be willing to share any insights, particularly regarding the intellectual property issues. I didn't mention Evelyn by name initially, just the company. To my surprise, he responded a few days later. He was wary, understandably, but also seemed intrigued that someone was asking about that old chapter. He agreed to a brief phone call. Speaking with David was eye-opening. He was still clearly hurt and angry about what had happened. He confirmed the core story. He had developed groundbreaking technology, felt betrayed and cheated by his partners, particularly by the CEO and one other partner who seemed to be working closely with him. He mentioned the name of that other partner, Evelyn. David described Evelyn as charming and initially supportive, someone who seemed to understand his technical vision, even though her background was in business. He had trusted her. But as soon as things got difficult financially, she had turned cold, siding with the CEO, minimizing his contributions, and ultimately maneuvering to push him out. He firmly believed they had intended to steal his technology all along, or at least use the company's structure to acquire it from him unfairly. He had limited resources to fight them legally after being forced out, and the confidential settlement had silenced him. This was it. This was the pattern. Evelyn had done this before. She had targeted someone with brilliant ideas, built trust, exploited their work, and then used legal or financial maneuvering to silence them and profit from their efforts. David's story was a chilling echo of my own experience, just 2 decades earlier. The difference was I wasn't just going to be silenced. David had kept meticulous records, emails, early drafts of legal documents, even notes from meetings. He was hesitant to share them at first, bound by the settlement's confidentiality clause. But as I explained the scope of Evelyn's current theft, the $900 million pitch, the public launch, her dismissal of my work, he became increasingly outraged. He saw that Evelyn hadn't changed. She was still preying on talented individuals, still using her position and charm to steal. He decided he couldn't let her get away with it again. The confidential settlement had a clause that prevented him from disclosing the details, but it didn't necessarily prevent me from finding out information through my own research or from using publicly available information derived from the case, or even information he hinted at without directly violating the confidentiality terms. More importantly, the statute of limitations on any direct legal action based on his case was likely long past, but the moral implications and the pattern it revealed were powerful. David agreed to guide me to publicly accessible records and obscure news articles that shed light on the situation, information I had overlooked. He also helped me interpret some of the legal documents I had found, explaining the tactics used to sideline him and devalue his contribution. He didn't give me confidential documents, but he gave me the map to find the breadcrumbs she had left behind, crumbs that pointed directly to her calculated deception and potential financial impropriety related to that earlier venture. The darkest secret wasn't just the intellectual property theft from David Chen, it was the financial manipulation that went with it, the way she and her partner had allegedly engineered the company's failure to gain control of assets and technology. This was more than just stealing an idea, it was potentially fraudulent business practice, a skeleton buried deep in her past that could completely shatter her carefully constructed image of integrity and business acumen. If this came out, investors would question everything she had ever touched. Her current $900 million initiative, built on my stolen work, would immediately come under intense scrutiny. Armed with this information, I felt a surge of power mixed with fear. I had the leverage. Now I just needed to figure out how and when to use it. I couldn't go to the press directly. Evelyn would spin it as a disgruntled former protégé making wild accusations, and without absolute definitive proof that I could legally present regarding her past, she might win the public relations battle. I needed to confront her, privately, and use the secret to force her hand regarding my pitch. I requested a meeting with Evelyn. Her assistant initially brushed me off, but I insisted, framing it as needing closure and wanting to clear the air after our last difficult conversation. Perhaps she saw an opportunity to further cement her narrative, to dismiss me one last time face-to-face. Or perhaps she simply underestimated me. She agreed to meet me in her office again, the same office where she had first called my pitch brilliant. The day of the meeting, I was a bundle of nerves but also strangely calm. I had done my homework. I had the facts, the timelines, the public records outlining the details of the failed startup and Evelyn's role. I wasn't the naive girl she had gaslighted weeks ago. I was a woman who had seen the truth and was ready to fight for it. I walked into her office, and the familiar space felt alien now, tainted by betrayal. Evelyn was seated at her large, polished desk, looking composed and slightly impatient. She gestured for me to sit. "Rachel," she said, her voice cool, "I agreed to this meeting because I believe it's important to maintain professional decorum, even when relationships change. However, I must reiterate, I will not tolerate further baseless accusations." I took a deep breath. "I'm not here to make accusations, Evelyn. I'm here to discuss the truth. The truth about my pitch, and the truth about your past." Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "My past? My past is an open book, Rachel. A book of success built on integrity and hard work." "Is it?" I challenged, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Because I've been doing some reading about a company called Innovate Solutions from about 20 years ago. a startup involving intellectual property disputes and financial irregularities. You were a founding partner, weren't you, Evelyn? The composed facade cracked. Just for a second, but I saw it. Her eyes flickered. Her jaw tightened. That was a lifetime ago, Rachel. A difficult time, a valuable lesson. It has no bearing on anything now. It has every bearing, I countered. Because the lead engineer on that project, David Chun, claims his technology was stolen. And public records suggest questionable financial maneuvers happened around the time you exited, conveniently before the company imploded and the legal battles began. It looks like a pattern, Evelyn. A pattern of exploiting others' work and then getting out when things get messy. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous hiss. You've been digging into my past? Are you threatening me, Rachel? I'm stating facts, I said, holding her gaze. Facts that show you've done this before. Built trust, taken someone's innovative work, and then manipulated the situation for your own gain. Just like you've done with my $900 million pitch. Your pitch is a rehash of common market needs, she snapped, her voice rising. It's not unique. My team developed Project Phoenix independently. We both know that's a lie, I said calmly. I have the emails, the dated versions of the pitch deck I sent you, the financial models. And now, I have information about Innovate Solutions and David Chun. Information that suggests this wasn't a one-time mistake or a valuable lesson, it was how you operate. No one cares about ancient history, she scoffed, trying to regain her composure. Especially something that was settled quietly. Your bringing it up will make you look desperate, unstable. Like you're grasping at straws because you can't accept that your ideas weren't as groundbreaking as you thought. Maybe, I conceded. But think about what happens if this ancient history comes to light now. Right as you're launching Project Phoenix, your big, revolutionary new venture. If the press, if your investors, if the public discover that the architect of this major new initiative has a history of potentially fraudulent behavior and intellectual property theft from her first major venture, what happens to your reputation then? What happens to Project Phoenix? Who will invest $900 million or any amount in a company led by someone with that kind of shadow hanging over them? I saw the fear in her eyes. It was fleeting, quickly masked by anger, but it was there. She knew I had hit a nerve. The secret wasn't just a moral failing. It was a liability, a potential career-ending scandal, if linked to her current high-profile project. What do you want, Rachel? She asked, her voice tight. I want credit, I said, my voice firm. For my pitch. I want a public acknowledgement that Project Phoenix is based on my original concept and work. I want a significant stake in the company launching it, commensurate with the valuation of the pitch I developed. And I want my reputation restored. I want you to tell the people you poisoned against me that you were mistaken, that my work was indeed valuable and original. Evelyn stared at me, her face a mask of calculations. She weighed the cost of my demands against the potential cost of her secret being exposed. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken threats and calculations. That's impossible, she finally said. Public acknowledgement? A significant stake? It's too late. Project Phoenix is already positioned as my company's innovation. Then I guess David Chen's story is going to become very relevant again, I said, picking up my bag and making a move to stand. I'm sure there are journalists who would be very interested in the history of Innovate Solutions, especially now. Wait, she said quickly. Sit down, Rachel. Let's discuss this. There must be another way. The confrontation wasn't a dramatic explosion of shouting, but a tense, strategic negotiation, fueled by my knowledge of her past and her fear of its exposure. We went back and forth for what felt like hours. She tried to minimize my demands, offer a small payout, a consulting gig, anything but acknowledging my ownership of the core idea or giving me equity. I held firm, referencing the details of Innovate Solutions every time she tried to lowball me. I know about the timing of your share sale, I said when she offered a paltry cash sum. I know about the alleged plans to sell the tech assets separately. This wasn't just mismanagement, Evelyn. This looks like deliberate fraud. And I'm sure the current investors in Project Phoenix would love to hear about your history with investor relations. Each reference to her past visibly unnerved her. She saw that I wasn't just making noise. I had researched, I had found the buried truth, and I was willing to use it. She couldn't gaslight her way out of public records and the testimony of someone like David Chen, whose story could be corroborated by those records. Finally, she capitulated, though not without a cold, resentful glint in her eyes. She agreed to a settlement. It wasn't everything I had initially demanded, but it was substantial. I received a significant equity stake in the company launching Project Phoenix, not as an employee, but as a founder/major shareholder, a recognition of my foundational contribution. The press release announcing my involvement would be carefully worded to acknowledge my original vision and foundational work that inspired Project Phoenix, positioning me as a key figure in its creation without her having to admit outright theft, but making it clear that the idea originated with me. My reputation would be salvaged, and I would benefit financially from my work. In return, I had to agree to a non-disclosure agreement regarding Evelyn's past, specifically the details I had uncovered about Innovate Solutions. David Chen's situation remained complicated by his earlier settlement, but my agreement ensured I wouldn't be the one to expose Evelyn's secret directly as part of the settlement. The threat of the information getting out still existed, of course, if she ever crossed me again or if David chose to act independently, but my primary goal was to reclaim my work and my future, not necessarily to destroy Evelyn, though the thought was tempting. Walking out of her office that day felt surreal. I had faced the woman who had profoundly betrayed me, used her own past against her, and walked away with a form of victory. It wasn't a clean, triumphant win. The settlement was a compromise, and the emotional scars of the betrayal would take time to heal. But I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be a victim. I had fought back using the truth I had painstakingly uncovered. The aftermath was complicated. The carefully worded press release about my involvement in Project Phoenix raised eyebrows in the industry. Some people were confused, others whispered. Evelyn, true to her word in the settlement, began to subtly shift the narrative among her contacts, acknowledging my brilliant foundational work, while still positioning her company as the engine of execution. It wasn't a full confession, but it was enough to begin rebuilding my credibility. The whispered accusations against me faded as it became clear I was a key player in the very initiative I had claimed was mine. My relationship with Evelyn was, of course, permanently severed. The woman who had been like family was now a business contact bound by legal agreements. The emotional connection was dead, replaced by a wary respect born of conflict and mutually held leverage. I saw her at industry events occasionally, and it was always awkward, a silent acknowledgement of the battle we had fought and the secrets we both held. Project Phoenix launched and was successful. My equity stake proved to be very valuable, providing me with financial security I could only have dreamed of before. This allowed me to pursue my own ventures on my own terms, without needing a mentor figure, relying on my own judgment and instincts. The process of healing from the betrayal was long and difficult. Trusting people again, especially in professional settings, became a challenge. I second-guessed intentions, looked for hidden motives. I had to actively work on setting boundaries, learning to protect my ideas and myself. The experience taught me a painful lesson about the difference between genuine mentorship and calculated exploitation disguised as guidance. It taught me that sometimes, the people who claim to support you the most are the ones most likely to betray you, especially when significant money and power are involved. Learning about Evelyn's past wasn't just a means to an end. It was a stark reminder that people's public personas can hide deep, uncomfortable truths. It reinforced the importance of doing your due diligence, even on people you think you know. David Chen's story became a quiet source of solidarity, a shared understanding of the manipulative tactics Evelyn employed. While the details of his settlement remained confidential, we stayed in touch, two people who had been wronged by the same individual, finding strength in each other's resilience. Ultimately, exposing Evelyn's darkest secret wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my work, and my future. It was about refusing to let someone else's unethical behavior define me or derail my potential. The The betrayal was devastating, but fighting back, uncovering the truth, and standing firm in my worth transformed me. I emerged from the experience stronger, more discerning, and with a fierce commitment to protecting my integrity and my work. The $900 million pitch wasn't just a business idea. It was the catalyst that forced me to confront betrayal, fight for my truth, and ultimately, step into my own power. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a difficult one to share, but I believe it's important to speak our truths, especially when they involve navigating complex, painful relationships. If you've faced similar betrayals, whether in your family or your professional life, please share your experience in the comments below. Connecting with others who understand makes a huge difference. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that sense of disbelief and the struggle for validation, please hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming adversity, setting boundaries, and finding strength after difficult experiences, please subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world. Remember, your ideas have value. Your truth matters. And no one has the right to steal your light. Stay strong.